All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm Noah Sawyer, and this is the Junto, and it's episode 34. It's Friday, the 27th of March, 2026. So, thanks for tuning in. And yeah, well, I guess a few things. Sometimes this is a really late show. Most people watch these after the fact. Most people don't watch them live, but sometimes I do feel kind of like Pagliacci the clown going to like earlier today. I just kind of, it's not that I didn't want to do a show, but it's hard to persevere sometimes, or to actually initiate the prep work and get it together. So yeah, it's like I wound up actually just being on my YouTube and clicking on the Tao reading video, and then being like, oh wow, there's, the Tao Te Ching is so good, and it opened my mind back up. But it was a very Pagliacci the clown moment, like, oh, why don't you just watch the Junto if you feel like you feel impotent and like you can't get your worldview together enough to share it with other people. Well, just, so that's how I felt. But anyway, yeah, I think I'm really ready to move, and I want to get out of the city and be in the woods. I think I'm going to just sleep in the woods for all of next week, actually. So next week is Holy Week. It's the end of the fast of Lent, and I'm converting to Catholicism at the Easter Vigil. So yeah, I just want to spend a week waking up in the woods, going to sleep in the woods. I think it would be a huge relief, because this has been a much more intense period than I realized it would be. I wasn't setting out to convert to Catholicism even when I started taking the church classes, but yeah, this whole Lenten period has been very intense. A lot of deep reflection, a lot of thoughts about temptation, and and doing the work that you feel like you want to do on earth. So yeah, it's just been intense, and I'm in a city, and I'm pacing my cell back and forth, and it just is miserable. So, and it's still pretty cold here, so I don't know. That's just what's going on with me. But yeah, so one of my viewers recommended I try TRE exercises. I guess I don't even know what TRE stands for. It might be trauma release exercises, but I tried them earlier today. I just watched a YouTube video, like a 30-minute YouTube video, where it's like I don't know if that is what TRE stands for, because it is also like tremor based. It's like involuntary muscle tremor tension release, essentially, through, I don't know, just through holding certain poses that are a little hard to pose, and then your body starts moving on its own, basically. But it was interesting. It made me cry. It was just, it definitely felt like sort of a trauma tension release thing. Even though I felt totally normal before doing it, I didn't feel profoundly sad or anything like that. I feel like this sweater looks crazy. I feel like I'm wearing like shoulder pads or something, but it is a little too big. But it looks really weird on the camera to me, seeing my reflection. Anyway, one last update thing is so I'm not going to do any shows next week. I'm going to take it off, and I'll be back Monday after Easter, so April 6th, I think. And yeah, but I will do one more stream. It won't really be an episode of the show, but yesterday I took the day off because I just wanted to get a couple things together. So I worked on a Patreon, which is not yet done, and I worked on a website to sell books from. So if anyone does want to support me, there will be two ways to do it. You could buy books from me directly from my website, which is not up yet, but it will be, probably by the next time I'm streaming, it should be up. Or by the next episode, it should be up. And then the other thing is, yeah, the Patreon should be ready to go really soon, like in the next couple days, I would think, unless I'm totally missing something with how to set it up. So yeah, I'll log on and just do a random stream. So if you want to be aware of that, either follow the Instagram or hit the notification thing on YouTube, and you can you can be aware when it goes live. So yeah, I'm excited about that. I don't really need to talk about it much right now because I'll do a whole little spiel about it once it is all official. So with that out of the way, we can get into the topic of today's show. This is one where it's one of those things where I really wish I could I wish I could have dug into it even more in my own time and created something nice to lay out, but I have to talk about it. I have to get it out first because it is, and then it will allow me to maybe turn it into an essay or just a more deliberate video. But I'm kind of thinking of this concept of nonconformity as a moral obligation in the current societal situation. And there are a few things that I have in mind here. It came up in a conversation with a friend that I had the other day, and I guess it was yesterday. The other reason I didn't do a show yesterday was I fell asleep on the floor. I was like doing a yoga pose and I just fell asleep. And I woke up and both my arms were like really like more asleep than they've ever been in my life. So that was a little concerning. But anyway, yeah, so I woke up and I was like, I do not think I can get back in the mood after this. It was like really close to start time. So anyway, so let's get into this idea a little bit. Me and my friend were talking, and we were about to separate after a long conversation, like maybe a couple hours of conversation, and we got onto this topic we started talking about the Taoist sense of, like, some people think of Taoism as this go with the flow religion, but it's very much not that. And the reason that it's not that is because of the enculturation that we receive when we're brought up in our society. And that even applied to thousands of years ago in ancient China. It was always taking us away from what could have been natural. So, and I put natural in quotes because there is something natural about it, but I think just the state of man, like the human condition as being able to make choice, removes us from the natural world in a certain way, and it makes it more challenging to determine what is the right thing to do. And it kind of requires some cultural security to preserve any sense of what is right for people to be doing. Otherwise you can get in some hot water, as humans have been in for pretty much all of our history ever since we started talking or something. So yeah, so I guess I don't really know how it surfaced, but from that Taoist concept, it is and it isn't going with the flow. It is going with a flow that we have become totally desensitized to, so it becomes really hard to go with that flow, to walk in the Tao. For example, there was just one little Tao verse I was going to read to preface this, and it's number 70. My words are easy to understand and easy to perform, yet no man under heaven knows them or practices them. My words have ancient beginnings, my actions are disciplined. Because men do not understand, they have no knowledge of me. Those that know me are few, those that abuse me are honored. Therefore the sage wears rough clothing and holds the jewel in his heart. And especially just those first couple lines, my words are easy to understand and easy to perform, yet no man under heaven knows them or practices them. It is easy because it is always available to us. It is always something that we can choose to embark upon becoming someone who walks in the way of the Tao. And I brought up from there part of Christ's Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 or 6 or 7, where he talks about his followers as, so the analogy here is followers of Christ are like followers of the Tao in the reading that I just did. So I got this huge Bible for 33 cents, and it's awesome. Yeah, so like right away in the Sermon on the Mount, which is one of the, if not the most significant single coherent teaching of Christ from the Gospels, there is, starting at verse 13, "You are the salt of the earth, but what if salt goes flat? How can you restore its flavor? Then it is good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Men do not light a lamp and then put it under a bushel basket. They set it on a stand where it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, your light must shine before men, so that they may see goodness in your acts and give praise to your heavenly Father." So, I want to draw sort of a connection. And, I mean, there's just so much to say about, obviously, there's so much to say because this is the main bulk of the show, about what really is wrong with the worlds that we have all grown up in, no matter how old we are, and really no matter where we grew up. And it basically, our society at this point has strayed so far from being in line with so-called natural principles, with, say, Taoist principles, that essentially we are necessarily born under this bushel basket that Christ talks about. So, men do not light a lamp and then put it under a bushel basket. Well, men didn't light the light that they are. Like, none of us are responsible for our own lives. St. Augustine, I think, points out that, a lamp is lit separately from itself. Someone lights the lamp. So God lights us. He creates the being that we are. And yet we are born in a cultural situation such that necessarily we are not on this lampstand. We're born under this bushel basket. And I will just read, I'll read actually maybe 3 little things here to illustrate and remind us of just really what we're dealing with when we are existing in the modern technological situation. So the first is from Jacques Ellul's Propaganda, and it's just a little note at the start of chapter 4, Psychological Effects of Propaganda. This book is very, very good, and hopefully just these couple paragraphs make you want to read it. I really encourage people to read this. So let us begin by examining what psychological effects propaganda operations have on the individual. Mind you, this is, I think, the late 50s that this came out. Aside from the effects that the propagandist seeks to obtain directly, such as a person's vote, for example. Sorry, I added one of those I added the such as by accident. His psychological manipulations evoke certain forces in the unconscious and traumatize the individual in various ways. I just want to underline that really hard, because we're in a propagandized situation, because that is the means by which our political structure has evolved to function. So democracy, ironically, functions through propaganda, and there's an economic, there's like a, like, this might illustrate it a little bit well here, which is Guy Debord's Society of the Spectacle, which I also encourage people to read. So I will read a couple little paragraphs here. So he talks about the spectacle as our society, but it's not just so yes, I'll just get into it. The spectacle appears at once as society itself, as a part of society, and as a means of unification. As a part of society, it is that sector where all attention, all consciousness converges. Being isolated, and precisely for that reason, this sector is the locus of illusion and false consciousness. The unity it imposes is merely the official language of generalized separation. The spectacle is not a collection of images, rather it is a social relationship between people that is mediated by images. Sound familiar? The spectacle cannot be understood either as a deliberate distortion of the visual world or as a product of the technology of the mass dissemination of images. It is far better viewed as a Weltanschauung, as a worldview that has been actualized, translated into the material realm, a worldview transformed into an objective force. And that's what I'm trying to get at here with this concept of propaganda, is this, so many things kind of converge at once, especially after World War II, where we come into this way of life that creates a worldview in people. And that worldview in people, in this sentence, he says that worldview in people comes first and it is actualized and translated into the material realm. And then what happens is in the material realm, everyone lives there and they propagate it into their children. And I want to underline that line from Jacques Ellul because it is traumatic. It is necessarily traumatic for everybody because everybody starts out as a child. You may think of people who are well adjusted to the society, but that is, different people adjust in different ways, but there is always a type of damage taken and a type of coping that is developed in the individual. So to continue here, the propagandist's psychological manipulations evoke certain forces in the unconscious and traumatize the individual in various ways. A person subjected to propaganda does not remain intact or undamaged. Not only will his opinions and attitudes be modified, but also his impulses and his mental and emotional structures. Propaganda's effect is more than external. It produces profound changes. And I think there's one more paragraph I was going to read here just for kind of just to sell you the book, not literally because I don't have extra ones here. I would love to sell this book to everybody, but when I see it anywhere, I buy it and just like give it to a friend because it's that good. So here he talks about psychological crystallization. Under the influence of propaganda, certain latent drives that are vague, unclear, and often without any particular objective suddenly become powerful, direct, and precise. Propaganda furnishes objectives, organizes the traits of an individual's personality into a system, and freezes them into a mold. For example, prejudices that exist about any event become greatly reinforced and hardened by propaganda. The individual is told that he is right in harboring them. He discovers reasons and justifications for a prejudice when it is clearly shared by many and proclaimed openly. Moreover, the stronger the conflicts in a society, the stronger the prejudices. Propaganda that intensifies conflicts simultaneously intensifies prejudices in this very fashion. Once propaganda begins to utilize and direct an individual's hatreds, he no longer has any chance to retreat, to reduce his animosities, or to seek reconciliations with his opponents. Moreover, he now has a supply of ready-made judgments where he had only some vague notions before the propaganda set in, and those judgments permit him to face any situation. He will never again have reason to change judgments that he will thereafter consider the one and only truth. And that has a lot to do with the critical thinking push that I'm trying to make with this show, where we really have to question all of our beliefs, and we have to ground our beliefs rationally and morally and understand where we're coming from, because it's so normal now to just repeat what we hear and believe what we hear, and that when you are doing that, you just become this instrument of propagation, a propaganda instrument. So, and that narrows your abilities. It closes off your creativity because you're not using your judgment, you're not using your creativity or your imagination or your linguistic capacity to its fullest extent, or your feelings to their fullest extent. So I'll do a couple more here. In this fashion, propaganda standardizes current ideas, hardens prevailing stereotypes, and furnishes thought patterns in all areas. that is so the thought pattern conformity amongst people now that we all have smartphones and spend a lot of time using smartphones is just really disturbing. Thus, it codifies social, political, and moral standards. Of course, man needs to establish such standards and categories. The difference is that propaganda gives an overwhelming force to the process. Man can no longer modify his judgments and thought patterns. This force springs, on the one hand, from the character of the media employed, which give the appearance of objectivity to subjective impulses, and on the other, from everybody's adherence to the same standards and prejudices. At the same time, these collective beliefs, which the individual assumes to be his own, these scales of values and stereotypes, which play only a small part in the psychological life of a person unaffected by propaganda, become big and important. By the process of crystallization, these images begin to occupy a person's entire consciousness and to push out other feelings and judgments. All truly personal activity on the part of the individual is diminished, and man finally is filled with nothing but these prejudices and beliefs around which all else revolves. In his personal life, man will eventually judge everything by such crystallized standards. To return to Stotzel, public opinion within an individual grows as it becomes crystallized through the effects of propaganda, while his private opinion decreases. So, I could just keep going because it's a great book, but I read it now just to emphasize that essentially we are all born into something that is not good for the world. It's not good for us. It does not respect life. It's a hateful and violent society that is contrary to any moral good. And another reading I will put there is in this is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It's a book on the doctrine, the interpretation of the Bible, essentially, the interpretation of the Christian faith. So in paragraph 1869, it says, "Thus, sin makes men accomplices of one another and causes concupiscence, violence, and injustice to reign among them. Sins give rise to societal situations and institutions that are contrary to the divine goodness. Structures of sin are the expression and effect of personal sins. They lead their victims to do evil in their turn. In an analogous sense, they constitute a social sin." And I bring that up because it demonstrates the temporal cultural architecture of sin, of evil, of propaganda, of reducing people's choices to controlled determinations, typically for economic ends or, anyway, so that's a little bit of the picture. And so to get back to my story about my friend and I, we are thinking about just how important it is to go against that in our current situation. And there really is I called this video Holy Nonconformity because in Catholicism there is a call to holiness. It is not for only the divine. It is similar to Taoism. I mean, Lao Tzu doesn't come out and say like, you have to follow the way or you'll be, I don't know. He's not really like, he's not laying it out. So, well, I don't know. It's hard to even say that because there are lines in there that are intense, and it's like you will be met with calamity if you avoid the Tao. So I can't even really differentiate them that hard. So the thing is, it's, he's laying out his way because he believes it's the true way. How do I know this? Because it's the beginning of heaven and earth. Like that is what he is trying to share with people through this poetry. And similarly, in Christianity, there's a call to holiness. There is the idea, as I understand it, is that God is providing us at all times with the ability to turn and do his will, or turn and walk in his light, and turn and become his, and brighten your your light and demonstrate the moral way to other people. And that is, in our particular society, that requires really swimming upstream at this point. It required swimming upstream at all points in history, and many people were martyred for trying to live that way and trying to spread that message. And it feels like the stakes are lower in our society in a way. Like, I think most Christians don't think they're going to be martyred, but also I think most Christians in our particular society have been adjusted by the values of the society and the images of the society that come to furnish their consciousness and furnish their worldview, which then they propagate into an actual world around them. That, sorry, I forget how I started the sentence, but, you know, that's why there's little danger of martyrdom. I think if you actually live in this way, it is so extremely contrary to the norms of our society. So just to demonstrate that concept, I'll read this part again, and I'll say a little bit. Yeah, so, okay. Verse 13 in Matthew 5. You are the salt of the earth, but what if salt goes flat? How can you restore its flavor? Then it is good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. So this is part one. And to take the salt analogy, salt was used less for flavor and more for preservation of meats and, you know, whatever else. I've never used salt to preserve anything, but I believe you would really like cake salt around stuff, and you could preserve it for a long time. And then when you wanted to use it, you could brush all the salt off and soak it, and probably soak it a few times just to get I imagine, you know, it's extremely salty at that point, so you have to try to reduce it somehow. But anyway, this was pointed out to me at Mass by Father Lacombe here in Providence, and so in a homily, he said that salt doesn't really actually lose its flavor. Like, salt is salt. It is the molecule salt. And so what does it mean for it to go flat? Well, it would go flat if it were beset with impurities. Say it was mixed in with other ingredients, but you know, not not culinarily, but say it's just mixed in with other powder, another chemical, then it loses what it is, and it loses its ability to do what it can do. And this applies to our current societal situation, because if we are the salt of the earth, we are here on the earth, we are this preservation of the divine message, or of the Tao, or of moral truth. If we are that preservation, and that is our ability, well, if we mix in with the diluting factors of our cultural world, then we lose our ability to preserve anything. So that is what it means to lose that flavor. And how do you go about avoiding that? In our current societal situation, it requires a type of nonconformity to those things that will hollow those values out of you or make you weak. Really, we have to find ways to enrich our being as much as possible. This is something that I was thinking about when I was doing that TRE exercise that I mentioned at the top of the show, a like trauma muscle release exercise, where I was thinking, and you know, it made me cry ultimately. Like, I think I hold tons of tension in my body from traumatic, just, you know, from the way my body has adjusted to existence. I think there's a lot of tension in there, and this seems like a promising way to get it out. But afterwards, I was thinking about it, and I was like, I probably should have written this down, but I was just thinking that, so as Lao Tzu says, the Tao is always available to us. It is an easy thing for us to always turn and do. It is provided by the state of the universe. It's under our feet at any time for us to step upon. And same thing in Christ. So through just existence, through just the existence that God provides, Yahweh being I am, being, existence, it's imbued in everything. It's a deep metaphysical concept. So I think about the complexity of the cells of my body and the complexity of the psychophysiology of my body, because that's what's happening when I'm like having these tremors that release tension, which is an emotional tension. I think to myself, if I am being enculturated by my society from birth to ignore all the depth of my body, then how could I actually ever love God? Because God has provided me with the body and with the ultimate complexity of it. And to search and understand that complexity and to heal it and to move through all of those processes and start to understand who I am in deeper ways, that to me is a deep part of what life is about, and that is what can heal you. So in the light of the salt analogy, that's funny, the light of the salt. It's really a salt and light analogy, but talking just about the salt one, we are getting diluted from day one. Our whole society wants us to be nothing because our society wants to preserve, it wants to destroy our potential to preserve moral truth in the world. It wants to destroy our potential to have any say over the way that we live our lives. It really, I believe it wants to take away all freedom. It is a highly controlling technological society. That is what it looks like to me. That's my whole experience of it. It seems not to care about people. People running it seem not to care about people or life in general. So, you know, if the norms of our society make us ignore the depth of the reality of our body, if the norms of society are to watch entertainment or be entertained all the time and not explore life out in the world, then that is the diluting of the salt. That is taking away the flavor of the salt, and that's us. So anyway, so it calls for a nonconformity. It calls from a, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to engage with anything made by Hollywood. I'm not going to engage with any, just any of this stuff that would impose itself into my psyche. I don't want these images. I don't want this way of life, period. Like, I don't want to continue the cycles of abuse that brought me into existence. I don't want to, I want to end it, and I want to love people. I want to love all people, and I want to love all life. And I want to love life beyond metabolic life. Like, I want to love the earth. I want to love dirt and rocks and space. Like, it's everything. So that requires saying no, especially to young people right now. It's like, that's every generation has failed, and now there's record numbers converting to Catholicism. I think there's so many diverse ways to find God, and I recommend the Tao Te Ching. It really opened my mind and my heart so much. And just read, really read anything, and read it well, read it deeply, read it critically, and start determining for yourself, well, not entirely for yourself, but just start working on, like, what do I really think is going on? What do I really want out of life? Because those questions are being suppressed. Everyone is having answers furnished for them. And as we saw in the Jacques Ellul paragraph, those furnished answers crystallize us into non-living beings, into automated beings. So I'll move on to the next paragraph. So, to get onto the light, he says of his disciples, which can be any of us. He's not just talking to, his 12 disciples. He's talking to anyone that would follow the path of love or seek truth. So, you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Men do not light a lamp and then put it under a bushel basket. They set it on a stand where it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, your light must shine before men, so that they may see goodness in your acts and give praise to your heavenly Father. So let's take the first example. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. So if you are really this light of the world, then it's like a city set on a hill. And that means you're unignorable. If you live in this way, you become unignorable, and that has two major consequences. One is you are totally vulnerable to attack because you are visible and you are hated. And on the other end, you are an example to others. The light is always there to guide people. You become a compass. So that's one sense with the city. But really what I want to talk about is this bushel basket example. So men do not light a lamp and then put it under a bushel basket. So in this example, God has lit many lamps, and they are all human lives. And God would not do that to put us under a bushel basket. However, we find ourselves in a societal situation where we have been it's it's like we're in like those Russian dolls of bushel baskets, like just so many of them. Oxygen barely comes through. At this point, it's like we're a spark on the lamp, like it's about to go out. I think that is the normal state for people in our society right now. And what are you called to do if you are this fire, you are this dying, close to death spark on a lamp under a pile of bushel baskets? Well, like really, like put yourself in the position and think about what you would do, because if I'm there, then you don't despair or give up hope. You think, well, what's the best case scenario? And I guess the best case scenario is, someone takes all the bushel baskets off and puts you up on the lampstand and gives you some more fuel or something. But we can't count on that. So what maybe instead of what's the best case, it's better to ask, what can I do? Like, what can I do in this position where I'm almost dead and, my soul's being extinguished, and out there, everyone else's soul is also being extinguished. So, really think about it. And I think it's, well, we're anthropomorphizing here. It's an analogy. So if I'm that spark, I start paying attention to the oxygen that does move within that space. Like maybe people are in and out of this room out there. Maybe the wind changes. There's open windows. There's air. There's atmospheric change under my bushel basket and outside of my bushel basket. So if you start learning, like, okay, well, sometimes things move in this way, and here are the clues that the wind is going to move in this way. Like sometimes I feel it just over here, and I know that this is going to happen. And then if you become really familiar with who you are as this lamp, like how can I react in a certain way? You find where is the heat hottest? Where is the heat most likely to catch? Where is there more fuel in the vessel? Like how can I orient myself such that I actually can take advantage of this societal situation, because there's still air, it's still moving. And it may be really dying out. The oxygen may be getting sucked out of the room, which is what it feels like to me in our world right now. But it's not gone. And so if you learn to play with the oxygen and play with your existence, you can think, okay, well, I know this sort of puts out my fire and this builds up my fire. I'm going to cut out all those things that start putting out my fire, and I'm going to start building up all those things that increase it. And then maybe you get to the point where you're like a candle again, and you're just this little flame. But then you can continue to play with it because you're becoming a master of your situation, and you're able to plan some tactics and some strategies and think like, okay, well, next time, like, there's a big storm and the wind really comes through here, like, I know how to react to it, and I know how to build myself up as a flame. So if that's my situation at this point, then maybe I can actually reach all the way over and, start heating up this one part of the bushel basket. And maybe I can get this wicker basket to catch on fire at some point. So if you can do that, here's where the example, I think, becomes really interesting. So if you can get to the point where you spark the bushel basket and the bushel basket sets on fire, then suddenly you are producing more light than you've ever created in your whole life. And who knows what the consequences of that would be? You'd have to think more about the example of the analogy. Like, is this a room full of like lamps under bushel baskets, or, what is going on? Because in that case, maybe your fire sets someone else's fire, or maybe your fire brings so much light to the room that light pervades through these wicker baskets, and some of these other sparks see like, oh wow, I can better register something about my situation now because I can see it a little bit better now. And now, I also, maybe I noticed that lamp was able to burn off its bushel basket, and now I know that I can do the same thing. So really, that is how I read this section of the Sermon on the Mount now. It is a call to that holy nonconformity. It's not to adjust. You don't adjust to being under the bushel basket just because you're under there. You find a way to live in the light and live in the truth despite the bushel basket. And through that burning off, that's the greatest thing you could do for anyone. And you become a city on the mountain through that. You become this unignorable example. You get a target on your back and you inspire other people. And that is something I think we should take away from this reading, and that we should hold in our hearts, really, and meditate on and think about how it applies in our actual lives. So, yeah. They set it on a stand where it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, your light must shine before men, so that they may see goodness in your acts and give praise to your heavenly Father. And that's the thing as well, or that's another element about it, just to finish up the paragraph, is so this light makes it so people see goodness in your acts, and they don't see goodness in you necessarily. They're not proud of you. They see the goodness of God. They see the goodness of the fact that this has been here for us the whole time to cast off, and the ability to cast it off has been ours. And that is the real praiseworthy thing. And that is ultimately what I believe. So, I'm a hopeful person, and this hope I intend to live and die. So there's you really can't go along with what's normal at this point. Because if you go along with what's normal, you're destroying your brain. You're destroying your relationships. You're being fake. You're doing a performance that is detached from the depth of life. And that is not why we're here. And it's dangerous business, obviously. I mean, we're in World War III. And how do you think we're in World War III? We're there because we have a totally passive, dumbed down population that is impotent and powerless. And not only that, well, it kind of goes together. I want to say even if they had power, they wouldn't do anything because they're propagandized. But it kind of goes together because if you're propagandized, then that's sort of the purpose, is to get power to function in a certain way. It's to get a certain social order to function. You propagandize various people in various ways so that they act in certain ways under certain circumstances, and it preserves a social order. So, that's kind of what we have to stop now. And it's so easy, and nothing could be more enjoyable than coming back to yourself and breaking out of the propaganda matrix. So anyway, that's what I got. I'll do another stream when the Patreon is ready, and I will, you should like the video, subscribe, share it if you like it. Hopefully I'll have some edits soon. Someone reached out and kindly offered to help me with that, so maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't. You never know. And let me check one thing real quick, because I forgot I had these notes, and maybe there was another insight I had there. No? Well, yeah, I guess one more little note, because I didn't read the Bible for a long time because it it just was not it just was not hitting. And they're like, it just, the simplicity of the language kind of turned me off in a certain way. It like, I guess also just the way that Christ is talked about in our society is so distasteful if you are getting it from just cultural sources. So it didn't seem as like, the thing about the Tao Te Ching is it's like, it's poetic, it's contradictory, it's simple, but it is so, it's kind of in your face about what it's making you confront. Whereas the Bible is huge, and it's kind of overwhelming, and it has a bad rap now because of the evangelical Christians and Christian Zionists and all the like psycho interpretations from Protestants. So but so that's something that, how many times I'm sure some people have heard about the salt and light analogy before. I've heard it a million times before, but I didn't get those interpretations out of it. That just clicked for me yesterday, and one of them didn't click with me until a priest said it in his homily. So the depth that starts to come out of it once you read more and more parts of it and start seeing how it's all interconnected is just insane. So I do recommend it. And yeah, it's taken together. Every sentence is taken with every other sentence. And the Catechism is good for understanding questions about what it really means. Someone says Augustine says the same thing about his initial reaction to the language of the Bible. Yeah, I saw that, and I resonated with it, and it's interesting because it totally shifts as you read it and develop your understanding of it. So yeah, I don't know. We just, we gotta do what's right. The society is trying to turn us all into zombies, or worse. So anyway, appreciate you guys for tuning in, and yeah, I'll let you know when the Patreon's up in case you want to help me out. I would appreciate it, because I'm all in on this thing, and I would like to devote all my time to it. Have a blessed Holy Week, and have a nice weekend. All right, good night, everybody.